Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fallout. This episode is all about the Cleveland Browns versus the Baltimore Ravens from Week 4. Before we get you prepared for Week 5, let's see what happened and what the trends are going to be going forward. All right, everybody, so let's just dig right in. Cleveland Browns, they throttled the Baltimore Ravens. I was in Miami taking in the games with my co-host of the Get Paid podcast and the Pick Six podcast, Brad. And Brad and I were watching this game. It was the featured game. We were watching a couple at the same time, but this is the one we were really dialed into. And let me just say, man, I've been saying this. If you watch this series, I've been saying this time and time again. If you are Cleveland, why in the world are you not running Nick Chubb? Okay, I've been saying this even since last year when Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley were still on the staff there. Not Todd Gurley, I'm sorry. Nick Chubb would come in, he'd play 5 snaps a game, he'd take 2 50 yards to the house. He's obviously the most talented running back they had on the roster, and he was the 3rd string. Well, flash forward a little bit last year. They finally feature him. Freddie Kitchens takes over. They kind of use him a little bit as a focal point. Baker Mayfield plays off of him, has a great finish to his rookie season. It was obvious. Anybody who watches this film, he can run between the tackles, and he has, if you watch that touchdown, okay, he had 20 carries, by the way, for 165 yards and 3 touchdowns. Could add a 4th. Hilliard actually got a touchdown. He should have been Chubb. He should have had probably another, 20 yards and another touchdown. But 3 touchdowns, 165 yards. This can be a regular occurrence for Cleveland if they just do it, okay? They ran him. Let me say this. This is the 2nd game in a row where Chubb has had 20 carries. They need to keep doing that. I think this is the first game where they really actually continued to give him the ball on the goal line. What had been happening, or what happened in specifically with that Rams game in Week 3, is they would move Chubb, and then when they would get to the 20 or the red zone, or they get to the 10-yard line, they'd start having Baker Mayfield throw the ball to Odell Beckham or Landry or whoever, blah, 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 blah. What this offense needs to do, and they would have won or at least forced overtime in that Rams game, run the ball. Run the ball. If you're first and goal from the 5, run the ball, okay? Or pass and then run the ball in second down. Don't go 3 or 4 plays in a row without letting your most talented player on your roster, no disrespect to Beckham, no disrespect to Baker Mayfield or anybody else. Chubb is that kind of elite talent outside of maybe, and I emphasize maybe, Ezekiel Elliott and maybe Saquon Barkley and maybe Christian McCaffrey. Chubb could be the best running back in the league. And honestly, if I were an NFL GM in like some kind of draft, right, and you're redrafting the rosters and I had the number 1 pick of all running backs, I'd probably pick Chubb. He's got the speed to take it to the house. Whenever Cleveland could get him the ball in the space, he's always a touchdown threat, just like Barkley is always a touchdown threat in the screen game. Plus, he has the strength to move the offensive line. I'm telling you guys, this is a major NFL talent. And if the Browns can continue giving him 20 carries a game and maybe working him in the passing game as well, he had 4 targets. I'd like to see that up to like 8 targets. 20 carries, 8 targets, maybe 5 receptions. Dude, that opens up everything. That opens up play action. That gives you more one-on-one routes for Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. If the defenses have to focus on stopping that talent and Nick Chubb, it opens up the passing game, and Baker Mayfield can have that 30 to 40 touchdown season with less passing attempts. It's not rocket science. This is tried and true. When you have somebody as good as Chubb, give him the ball. But good for Cleveland. They did that, and you know what? They dominated. This was not a fluke game. They came out. They were the team that was hungrier. I think maybe Baltimore, coming off that loss to Kansas City, they got a lot of positive press even in that loss to Kansas City. I think they were kind of believing their hype, and they laid an egg at home. I mean, they just couldn't get anything going. Cleveland's defense really dominated that offensive line, I thought. The running game, for example, for the Baltimore Ravens, 12 carries for Ingram, actually had 5.9 yards a carry, which is nice, but they couldn't get the yards when it counted. And Lamar Jackson, 3 touchdowns, which is nice, but 2 interceptions. They just couldn't get it going. And when you can't stop the offensive line and the offensive running attack, things just get easier. Baker Mayfield, 20 completions, 30 yards, 1 touchdown. Jarvis Landry, 10 targets, 8 receptions. Odell Beckham, 7 targets, only 2 receptions. Is that going to happen every week? I don't know. The locker room might get a little disjointed if Chubb is really, the focal point of that offense. But let me say this. I don't think it'll be an issue for Baker Mayfield. I think he'd be perfectly happy handing the ball off and taking some easy touchdown passes. My question is, will Odell Beckham be able to handle not being the focal point of the offense as he had been the first couple weeks? I don't know. It remains to be seen. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but this team will win more games running the ball. I'll say that. From a fantasy football point of view, okay, the one guy I would suggest picking up, and he should be available in most of your leagues, Seals Jones, the talented ex-tight end. And when I say ex, he's the ex-Arizona Cardinal. Didn't really fit in what Cliff Kingsbury's doing over in Arizona. He hits the waivers. Cleveland, they have Njoku on the injured reserve now. Well, wouldn't you know, Seals Jones pops in there. He's a great fit. He can step right in, and we saw 3 targets, 3 receptions, 82 yards, and a touchdown. This is, I think, the second game in a row where tight ends got in the end zone for Cleveland. I think Seals Jones is the most talented tight end on that roster at this point. He will be a weapon in this offense going forward if he can stay healthy, especially with Nick Chubb. I mean, if you're talking about first and goal from the 5, play action, everybody's focusing in, bottling up. Seals Jones can kind of feign a block, pop out to the flat. This is a really, really good one. And then, like I said, Chubb, it's going to open things up for Beckham. It's going to open things up for Landry. So I think you can be patient. But Seals Jones is my fantasy football nugget from the Cleveland Browns. Now, let's talk about Baltimore. Like I just read the stats off, 71 yards for Ingram, but only 12 carries. They got to run the ball more. Lamar Jackson had a kind of nice game when you think about it. Now, the 2 interceptions we don't like, obviously, but 24 completions, 34 on 34 attempts, 3 touchdowns, and they fumbled too much. I mean, every time I looked up, it wasn't too many. Let me look at the total fumble numbers. I know it's probably not as dramatic as I'm saying, but Mark Ingram lost a fumble, and that's it. Only 1 lost fumble, 2 interceptions. You can't turn the ball over 3 times. It's a bummer. I still like Baltimore. I'm not down on them at all. I just thought that Cleveland came out and they wanted the game more. Baltimore, I think, will respond. They have a road game at Pittsburgh where they're actually 3.5-point favorites. I like Baltimore's ability to move forward there. Let's see. I'm looking at the receivers here. Mark Andrews got in the end zone again. He's a weekly play, obviously. I've been saying I like Boykin more than Snead, but both got in the end zone. The problem is Marquise Brown, their defenses are really trying to focus in on him and not give him the deep ball. Only 4 catches and 22 yards, which is a bummer if you were starting Marquise Brown as I was. But let me say this. Defenses adjust. They adjusted, and they're trying to take away Brown. Well, as they come in, that Baltimore running attack is good if they just continue to stick with that rushing attack. As Cleveland out Baltimored Baltimore this week. And I think that's kind of the narrative of the game. If instead Ingram had 20 carries for that 5 yards per carry, it would be good. Now, Chubb, 8.3 yards per carry. We can't expect that every week, but I'm telling you, he has that potential every week. Otherwise, from a fantasy football point of view, Seth Roberts had a lot of receptions, but I really wouldn't invest in him. Boyle and Hurst get some targets, but to me, this offense is all about Marquise Brown. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is the focal point and Mark Ingram. But outside of that, the passing attack is all about Andrews. I think he is the best, most consistent person on this Ravens team from a passing attack. And I like Marquise Brown, but I think Miles Boykin is going to get better and better and better. And as Boykin ascends and continues to get better, then that's going to open things up for Marquise Brown. So I do think that Baltimore is a team that can improve. Certainly in the passing game, they're giving up a little bit too many yards. Granted, they got gashed in the running game, but I think that's more Nick Chubb and his ability to break long runs here and there. That 88-yard touchdown run was something, man. He was outrunning safeties, aggressive. I mean, it was just insane. So props to Cleveland. I've been down, I've been critical, but if they can run the ball, as I've been saying all year, if they can continue to be disciplined enough to make Chubb that focal point, they're going to be a really, really tough team to beat. They have talent everywhere on the offense, and I think that the more you run Chubb, the more deep hits you're going to get with Beckham. That's a good thing. Baltimore, I don't think there's anybody else you want to pick up outside of maybe Boykin. If you're in a deeper league and you want to hold him, I think he's a guy that can pop more in the second half of the season. He's going to continue to get better, so I like him quite a bit as well. That takes us through the episode. If you could please help us grow our channel, all you have to do is subscribe to the channel and watch a couple of videos. I do every week. I do these fantasy football fallouts for what happened. I also do primers to see what's going to happen in the week ahead. The fantasy football fallouts usually drop on Tuesday and Wednesday. The primers usually start dropping on Thursday, and we have a ton of other content as well. Waiver wire gems, deep daily fantasy and waiver plays. If you're in the bye week hell, we have start sit, all these kinds of things. Standard kind of fantasy football fare, but we have them, and we have our own analytics and spin to put on them as well. So we're a little bit different than what you're going to get everywhere else. Hey, it's always good to get a different opinion. All right, once again, thanks everybody. Subscribe, watch some videos, and we'll catch you on another episode. Thank you.